Hello and welcome to this episode of the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're doing feedback on episodes 4 and 5 of Obi-Wan Kenobi, getting ready for the final episode with Riki and Sarah Hayashi. All that and more after a commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. I'm Matthew Fox, they, them pronouns.
I'm Sarah Hayashi, she, her.
And I am Riki, he, him.
Riki and Sarah, it's funny, we spent such a long time getting ready for Kenobi. It feels to me like this has flown past. In about a little more than 24 hours, the last episode of this show is going to air. How's the ride been for you all?
Yeah, I totally agree. I can't believe it's almost over. Feels like graduation is coming and I'm still thinking about winter break.
I now want probably 4 to 6 different spin-offs from the show of characters and stuff that's happened.
Let me see if I can guess. Let me see if I can guess some more of them. We want Princess Leia doing Princess Leia things, because we'll take as much of her as we can get. You're supposed to respond to my guesses.
I mean, I'd take that. I don't think it was on my list, but
I don't know. I think I've gotten enough of her. I am hungry for stuff like the Tala spinoff.
Yeah,
because her character and her droid
Ned B. Oh.
Yeah. I would love something just about the path. I think that would be. There's a lot about this period between. The end of the prequels, and then the Bad Batch pushes it a little further, and this is pushing it a little further. But this period of what happens, especially what happens to the Jedi, and how does this sort of slow gathering of people who are opposed to the Empire happen? We see the beginnings of it in the Bad Batch. We see kind of the last stages of it in Star Wars Rebels, and this we're starting to get kind of the middle points. I agree. Yeah, I would love to see a lot more of that.
Yeah.
I need the Force Sister spinoff now because she has been criminally underused in this series.
Or at least for her to show up, and maybe she's going to be in Fallen Order Part 2.
Yeah.
Who knows?
Fifth brother got to do some mean mugging and getting into arguments with Reva, and that was good. And Force Sister had 3 lines, maybe.
And Fifth brother has also had quite a significant role in Rebels as well. So we got a lot of Fifth brother, but yeah, I agree. I'd like to see Quinlan Voss. He's been mentioned in name. I'm down with seeing him and Varys. Is that who it is? Who's
Ventress?
Ventress. Jeez.
Yeah. Sorry.
It's been a long day for me. But yes, the him and Ventress. Jeez. Arc, and just more about the path, right? Obviously Quinlan is a part of it in some shape or form.
Well, Ventress is dead.
Okay.
At this point.
But
right.
It doesn't have to be right now. You could do flashback or set it in a different time period. Yeah.
And Quinlan Voss may also be dead. There are people who have enhanced the Jedi crypt and they believe they have identified Quinlan Voss in one of the Amber
That's just
prisons.
What they want you to think.
Maybe, and it might not be him.
Okay.
And certainly you could get more storytelling that either goes forward from this show or that is the time before this show. So you could get Quinlan and Ventress, who famously team up in the book Dark Disciple. As a couple people have now pointed out online, somewhere, maybe Quinlan, maybe someone else, but probably one of the people who went was helped by this group of the Path, was Grogu. Somehow Grogu gets rescued out of the Jedi Temple, and I kind of don't want him to be I don't want the reference to him to be dropped into the last episode of this, because it would feel like it'd be dropped in just to drop it in. But his story's got to be somewhere in there. And this actually let me kind of make a larger point that I want to get your all thoughts on. I think one of the reasons why I like a lot of those stories, and the thing I'm struggling with the show, although I'm now liking it, I'm definitely enjoying it a lot more than most. It's not my favorite. Is it's reminding me of all the reasons why I love Rogue One as a prequel, and that just in general, I am always here for a prequel that helps build the world, that helps explain the world, that helps tell me more about how things got to be where they are. But one of the things that makes a story really good is character development. And with prequels, at least I always feel like one of the real problems is you can't really develop characters very well because everyone already knows where they're supposed to get to. And it's possible, certainly. But to me, like something like Rogue One, to me, I think a lot of the problems that people are having with Kenobi, some of which are just idiotic, but some that are legit, are because just the inherent problems of prequels that you're always going to have. And something like Rogue One, where it's the prequel of a story, but 90% of those characters you'd never heard of and knew you were never going to hear of, it just worked a lot better. What do you all think? How is this show, the 5 episodes had at least, make you thought about like prequels and what works and what doesn't work?
Yeah, I like what Paul said in your like immediate reaction episode about how he's thinking of it as a sequel of the prequels and not a prequel of the original trilogy, as this way, like, it's sort of character development line. But I mean, like, I rewatched Rogue One. I don't like Rogue One, and I know I'm a huge outlier for it, but I get what you're saying, and I think those are the reasons why I like Rebels so much, is because it's these original characters who we have like maybe a few mentions of, or like are loosely tied to other characters, right? Like Ahsoka comes into Rebels, we get Obi-Wan in Rebels, but it's not about those main characters. They don't have these determined fates that we know about, right? And that's why I think it's super engaging. I agree. I know it's not your favorite, but I loved Solo, and I think that's because like Han is removed like so far enough that like just seeing backstory about Han, seeing young Lando, like was like, it was far enough away that I liked it, right? It wasn't like Rogue One where it had to like back up immediately against a movie, or even Obi-Wan, right? Where we have to like, we have this set endpoint that's coming up right away, right? And so much of the story is being told. So yeah, I get what you're saying.
Yeah,
and
that's fair.
Yeah.
At some point, I want to rewatch Solo and just erase any reference in my head to Star Wars, and just think of it as like, you know, just a movie about swashbucklers in space. Because I think on that, like, and here this is kind of getting into a larger topic. We don't have to go into it today, but all this discussion has made me think a lot about how we think about what is good and what isn't, you know, and like I've come to feel that for me, for Star Wars stuff at least, I have two different ways I rank things. One is it a good piece of media? Is it a good movie? Is it a good TV show, etc.? And the other is, how well do I feel like it fits and enhances the Star Wars story? And like, to me, the prequels are all, with the possible exception of the third one, pretty bad as movies in terms of just dialogue, writing, directing, but do a great job of filling in the story. I think Rise of Skywalker is the exact opposite. I think it's a perfectly well-made, and I would say maybe even Solo, from my perspective at least. So, yeah, I think it's a really good way of looking at it. And I know Paul has said similar stuff about like that he's able to enjoy Kenobi a lot more if he thinks of it as, how do you describe it? A sequel to the prequels, but not a prequel to the original trilogy.
Yes.
You know, it's just kind of like, it's like the Kelvin universe in Star Trek. You know, it's just its own thing. I'm like, okay, that could work. You know, whatever works for you.
Yeah.
I think I fundamentally disagree. Like, I love Kenobi. I think this is so far my favorite Star Wars TV show of the live action ones. And I know it started off slow. Like, the first 2 episodes were not even for me great. But the escalation of 3, 4, and 5 has been absolutely amazing and is everything I ever could have asked for out of this show. So, you know, awesome. As I said in our previous feedback episode, like when we talked after episode 2, it's like, you got to be patient with these things because it's an entire journey. These aren't TV shows like back in the old days where it's 26 episodes and each one is like an individual story. The entire 6-show arc is a story, and we have to see it through before we really start to evaluate the entire experience.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's necessarily like it's right. It's a mini series, right? It's not like episodic TV. I agree with you there. But like, I wasn't on board with Kenobi until episode 5, and now I'm like all in, like strapped in, ready to go. But it took me until episode 5 before I actually got excited about it again, I guess. Mm-hmm. And maybe that's why I feel like it's ending so soon too, because like I was so hyped for Obi-Wan, and then like a month went by before I actually got like really excited about it again.
Right. That totally makes sense. And I think I'm kind of in the middle of you two. I think I've been enjoying it this whole time. I've had some quibbles. I think episode 5 felt like the payoff to Reva. We should definitely talk about her specifically. Mm-hmm. You know, I don't think I was ever on the board with like, oh, I always thought she was an interesting character, and I was interested to see where they went with her. And I feel like what they have done with her is incredibly satisfying. You know, and I think people are just going to have different opinions on it. I think that's okay. Because I do think, I definitely do agree with you, Riki, that, the folks who were saying like, oh, I hate this show because her character doesn't make sense, or I hate the show because they killed the Grand Inquisitor. Like, yeah, give it time, folks. Like, it's funny. I'm currently in the process of rewatching Star Trek Discovery with one of my partners. Which, have you two seen that show?
Nope.
Okay, are you planning to watch it at some point?
Is it like a CBS All Access situation? Yeah. Probably not. Then we have so many streaming things. Like, maybe eventually, but go ahead and spoil things.
You're both okay if I spoil something? Okay, because there are... I'll be broad about it, but I'll say that there are 2 characters from underrepresented groups, both of whom die off fairly early in the show. Mm. And I think for legitimate reasons, it generated a lot of anger from fans who were very excited to see these. Both of them wound up coming back in an incredibly satisfying way that really worked for the story. And that's, to me, been a, like... I think that's a somewhat different example, because I think that there's a difference between I don't like this character, so I don't want to wait a couple episodes, versus my representation's been killed off. Mm-hmm. But I think even there, it was kind of a nice reminder to me of like, yeah, sometimes like see where the story is going before you leap to the conclusion.
So with Discovery, do you think it was like the writers responding to fan feedback, or like this was always the plan and it just... you had to wait to play it out?
No, in both cases it happened within like 5 episodes.
Oh, okay.
So I think it was definitely always the plan, and it was done in ways that really worked.
Okay.
Yeah.
I also think that we have been maybe ruined in some way by the short season arc type TV with WandaVision. Like, WandaVision 1 through 4, maybe even 5, was some of the most compelling TV I've watched in recent memory. And it was, it was mystery box TV. So you were just like waiting for next week. Like, we have to know what's going on. Like, what is going on? And right. It built up. And then for us, for Sarah and myself, it let us down like big time at the end. But I still think like that build up is what people are expecting from these short run shows. So when the first 2 don't immediately grab you, it seems disappointing. And for me, like, I was like, I'm still waiting. And then when Vader showed up in 3, I was like, now it's grabbed me. Now I'm on for the ride. Let's go.
Yeah, that's fair. Now, it's funny because at first, Riki, you said that you think this is your favorite Star Wars television show, and my eyebrows shot up pretty high. And then you corrected favorite live action. Where does this compare to you to Rebels or Clone Wars?
It's hard to say. I think Rebels is a phenomenal show. It's very hard to compare, especially when you only have 1 season of something, and we may only ever have 1 season of Kenobi, right? Like, the television is just evolving in such a way that it's getting very difficult to compare shows to each other in terms of like what they deliver. And I have the same issue even comparing like Rebels to Star Trek The Next Generation, which was one of those old 26 episode shows, right?
Yeah. I think it's very fair.
And it's just, I don't know. I just enjoy both, and I'm really looking forward to 6, the last episode.
I think that's fair. It's funny too, because one thing I've sort of felt with this is that you're right. It does feel very much like all one story, and I know this is where I differ from a lot of people. I kind of wish stories like, I think for mystery box things like what you're talking about, it is really fun to wait each week and discuss and get into it, even if some people get a little too into the Mephisto of it all, as happened in some fan circles with with WandaVision. I think a story like this, like, to me, talking about in WandaVision, every episode was a lot more self-contained. Mm-hmm. Whereas this, it feels like telling me, like, do I like episode 4, episode 3? It's kind of like, do I enjoy different chapters of one of my favorite books? Yeah. It's all just the book. And I do think at least I would be enjoying Kenobi a lot more if I could just binge it in an afternoon. Mm-hmm. And I'm probably going to do that with Mary and see how that changes it for me. But overall, I think I'm definitely enjoying it a lot. For me, it's not... Mandalorian season 1 is still kind of the gold standard, I think, of Star Wars. But is that because I think it's better made, or is it just because it is characters who I don't know and so it appeals more to me? I don't know. And I think it's one of the best parts of this whole conversation is that just, part of why I think it's important to get away from like what is the best Star Wars is we all want something different from Star Wars. And so it's okay that it's going to be different for each of us,
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I think I completely agree with if I could sit and watch it in one go, I think I'd like it a lot more than like the waiting, because it feels like there's not, like as Riki pointed out, there's not something to be waiting for, right? You're just like wanting to continue the story. And I think like the way that they even title, I totally forget if this is how they did it in Mandalorian, but each episode is called part, right? Like part 1, part 2. So we're waiting for part 6 to come out, which I think maybe it's trying to lend more to that idea of like, these are all just parts of the same story. Like it's one big novel. It's what we should have done with Eternals. What? And like broken it up over 6 hours, 6+ hours-ish, right? Like wasn't the first one a bit longer? Anyway, yeah, it's like a 6-hour movie, but obviously we're not going to expect you to sit there for 6 hours. So we've sliced it up for you. Enjoy.
Yeah. And I know a lot of folks, myself included, have said like, oh, well, we're only getting one more episode. This next episode is 95 minutes long.
Yeah, okay.
So we're basically getting a movie.
A movie, yeah.
Or two episodes of this length. So, yeah. So let's talk about some of the biggest things that happened in these 2 episodes since I last had you on. I think the biggest is the reveal about Reva. What'd you all think of like where they went with her character?
Fantastic. My biggest worry with Reva was that her backstory would be too similar to the second sister's backstory in the video game Fallen Order, because they're female inquisitors that seem to have been Padawans and or younglings during the Jedi Council days. So I did not want it to be too close. It wasn't. It's very different. I'm not going to spoil what the second sister's story exactly is, but it is different enough that I'm very satisfied, and I love that she has reached this point with the Force and the dark side that she is hunting Vader, but she's doing it for very evil reasons, for dark side reasons.
Yeah, and I like that she didn't. I guess she went along-ish with Obi-Wan's plan in the end to like get Vader, but I like that. It wasn't like the enemy of my enemy is my friend. It was like the enemy of my enemy is still my enemy. Right. We just like have this aligned goal. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. It's very clear that Reva is still not Obi-Wan's number one fan by any stretch of the imagination, but her desire to get Vader overwhelmed her desire to get Obi-Wan. So she chose that battle. And yeah, I like it a lot. At first, I too was like, double tap, you guys, like Grand Inquisitor, Darth Vader, why aren't you killing Reva? But the more I think about it, the more it makes sense that they've left her alive, like especially because basically Anakin's left her alive since she was a youngling, right? If we're like following this arc, if he knew the whole time. So the idea that he would like keep her alive now, it kind of seems like the ultimate negging, right? They're like, oh, your rage, it was useful, it's not useful anymore, babe. Like, see you later. And then they're like leaving her this opportunity to like, oh, but prove yourself to the dark side.
Yeah, it's clearly a lie when he says you are of no more use.
Yeah.
Otherwise, he would have just like sliced her up completely or whatever.
Yeah.
So they're using her. They're still using her.
Right. Well, I think it could be either one. Cause it's funny, actually. I think that's a good interpretation. But also, Sarah, as you were saying it, especially the negging part of what I was hearing is like, if the idea is never leave an enemy alive if they could be a threat to you. You know, you say that to someone and they're like, but I'm going to leave you alive. It's the ultimate, like, utter, I am so unafraid of you that I'm just not even going to bother. You're not even worth me killing you.
Yeah.
She's not a threat.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I don't think... I agree. Like, I think Grand Inquisitor and Vader have this, like, on lock. They don't find her threatening, which is partly why they're not killing her. But also, like, I think they still think that she can be useful, right? Like, she hates Obi-Wan a lot. She has this need to prove herself. And, like, hates Vader, but, like, in this rage that is obviously fueling her dark side powers. And, like, I think y'all pointed out in your immediate take of episode 5 that, like, Reva hasn't seemed super duper strong with the Force. And, like, yeah, we've only seen her, like, chucking bombs. Like, she threw the bomb to, like, blow up Wade, and she'd use, like, some mind powers. Wade! She's, like, used her mind powers a little bit. But, yeah, for the most part, like, she's nowhere near as strong as Anakin, obviously, as, like, he's so deftly pointed out by just, like, shimmying away from her. So good. But, like, giving her more rage, like, fueling her with rage, and, like, maybe she'll come back even stronger and be a good Inquisitor again. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also, I think Vader he's happy to have all these different pieces on the chessboard, you know? And it's like, well, just, if you're utterly not a threat to me, but maybe in some world you do get strong enough to kill the Grand Inquisitor and take over, sure, you know?
Yeah, exactly. And I think, like Vader learned from Palpatine how to play the long con, right? Like, he's got machinations, and he's willing to sit and stew on them.
Yeah. The fact that he stabbed her in the same way as when she was a youngling in the temple
so good.
was very much mirroring, like, I'm gonna do the same thing, leave you alive, check back with me in another 10 years, and we'll see how you've progressed.
Yeah. No, I think it was so good. And I talked more about this on the other episodes, so I don't want to go into it too much, but I'm curious to hear your thoughts. But just for my own thing, I just love that she stayed dark side. You know, to me, I think I was happy to have her take a turn like this. I didn't want her to be still a Jedi. I didn't want her to be, oh no, I was like, no, I like that her goals overlapped with our heroes. And so she was willing to help in that moment. As Paul described her as an anti-villain, you know, as opposed to an anti-hero. And I love that. But she still has no problem with collateral damage. She still has no problem. You know, she would have happily tortured, like, no Jedi is going to torture a 10-year-old to get what they need. And she happily would have. And
And, like, she also, like, she was only a youngling when Order 66 happened. So she wasn't even, like, deeply entrenched in Jedi ways yet. So it's not like even, like, she would be going back to being a Jedi, really, right? It would be this, like, weird, like, born-again Jedi situation, which is just, that would have been really unsatisfying. I totally agree.
Yeah. Oh, you just saying that, though, now makes me wish that the order in which these stories were told had been reversed, because imagine if we didn't have Rebels yet.
Okay.
Because she's probably about the same age as Kanan.
Yeah. She's a little younger, but yeah.
But the two of them, like, meeting up and being like, you know, we both came from this experience and look how different we went. Like, oh.
Yeah. I mean, like, okay, to be fair, she had to, like, hide amongst the corpses of her, like, family, whereas Kanan just ran away. Like, there's a little bit of, like, trauma difference there. But no, I agree. And, like, there's probably loads of Jedi who have that exact same story as Reva, right? Because, like, how did they
She could be the main antagonist in the next Fallen Order game. And you still have that moment of, like, you know, look how different we turned out. And it being in part because she had such a more traumatic experience.
But I mean, like, there's also probably Jedi who, like, followed the path, who had that similar traumatic experience and didn't turn to the dark side. And, like, maybe let's explore why, right? Yeah.
Good stories.
For sure.
Anything else? We did get a good number of feedback. I think it's going to lead us into some great conversations. But any other comments you two had before we jump into those?
I guess I would just like to talk about, you all discussed the content warning at the beginning of the episode, and I, for me personally, found it very appropriate. And when I saw it, I knew what was going to happen, or some of what we were going to see or discuss in the episode. But given the recent events that we have gone through in the United States, with school shootings and children, especially, like, some of Reva's lines almost perfectly mirrored what one of the survivors, the children in Uvalde, said that they had to do in order to survive that shooting. So it's obviously immensely tragic, and I thought it was appropriate, but I would have liked to have seen the warning be a little more specific, because it just says like general
violence, like your discretion
or something.
Yeah.
So especially when it's something so recent, I think it's very important. I think Stranger Things had a similar warning at the beginning of the season 4. And it's unfortunate that we have to live in these times where fiction like that can remind us of actual real world tragedy around us. You know, it's supposed to be an escape. And if people can't escape, then yeah, these content warnings are very appropriate for that.
And I think the content warnings are on all the episodes now. Like, I don't think they used to be. I think they just recently put them on all the episodes, so we didn't notice until this one. Yeah. And yeah, like, we talked about kind of this rehashing of Order 66 and how we're seeing it over and over and over again. And like, I do think it makes sense to the story. I don't mind that we're seeing it again, but I agree that like having that like trigger warning basically there is important.
There's a big difference in like an Order 66 depiction of clones shooting an adult Jedi,
or even just like randomly into a crowd. Yeah,
like the wide shot of the temple carnage, versus like Rivas telling her specific survivor story. I think is very difficult for some people to listen to.
I think that's very fair. And I think it's a topic that we talked about a little bit on the last Star Wars episode, and then myself, Paul, and Ashley got into a lot more. Me and Paul got into a lot more in an episode we had about the way that kids and the death of kids as opposed to the death of adults is treated on the superhero ethics. And I think I'm at a place more of where I think there's a better way to do content warnings in general, of making it more about proactively seeking it out. But I definitely do agree that, like, in the current system we have content warnings, if anything's getting a content warning, yeah, absolutely this should. You know, I think that's very fair. And
like,
I think
we already have content warnings for so many things, and they're just like normal now, right? Like in the top corner of every episode, it's like, oh, drug use is depicted, and that's like a nothing thing. And like, I don't know. I feel like it's totally normalized. I'm all for normalizing content warnings. Like, I don't know.
And you never know. Like I watched a movie with someone who found the depiction of drug use very disturbing, and they had to like stop watching that movie. So I think like having some kind of key phrase or something like that to help people.
And like, Matthew, I know you guys talked about, there's a website that Paul brought up that has like a bunch of different ones, and like
does the
that
dog
totally
die?
Makes sense. Yeah, if you have like a more specific thing that like for some reason bothers you but maybe wouldn't be covered by this generalized content warning. And what I would love to see, this is like me far out, but like all these streaming services, like, why can't I program in the things that I would like you to like splash a warning up for me before I select a show? Like, that would be great, right? Okay, anyway.
We have the because like I think I said on the other episode, you know, I don't think, you know, a show where a mother dies is necessarily going to be a content warning for most people. Most of the time, it wouldn't be for me. For about 6 months after my mother died, if I saw something with that, I was devastated. And I would have loved to be able to, like, have that website and go in and say, you know, et cetera, et cetera.
And, like, just, like, warn you, like, hey, Mamma Mia has this, FYI. Maybe you wouldn't know about it. Maybe we shouldn't, like, need to tell this to absolutely everybody.
Exactly.
But, yeah, completely agree. And, like, you can, like, so many mailing lists now will let you opt out of like Mother's Day or Father's Day emails. I know Facebook, you can tell them like, don't show me ads for like pregnancy anymore. Like the technology's there. It just needs to like, why can't we bring it to streaming services? Yeah.
The sad thing is the people who have figured this technology out are like the super conservatives. Like, there are things you can have like that'll be like, don't show me anything where, you know, two men kiss, or, you know, where women wear pants, or, you know, whatever kind of ridiculous thing they're upset about.
Sure.
But, so the tech's out there. We can figure it out. Yeah. All right, let's dive into some of the feedback we got, because we got some great questions here, including one actually that really made me think about where we're doing all these podcasts that I'll talk about. But let's start with, first of all, Mr. Joe Wilson. Joe Wilson writes, has Obi-Wan ever called himself Obi-Wan in front of her? I think he's meaning Leia. She seems to be calling him exclusively Ben. She might not even realize that they are even the same person. So I think this is speaking to that question of, you know, that some of us were asking, including myself, of like, how does her having all these experiences with him connect with her acting like she kind of has not really, you fought with my father during the Clone Wars instead of you saved me from numerous being kidnapped when I kept running off.
Yeah, remember that time on Dayu? Yeah. So I don't think he's ever called himself Obi-Wan in front of her, but plenty of people have called him Obi-Wan in front of her. Mm-hmm. And like maybe she just didn't clock it. And maybe she just doesn't like remember. She thinks of him as Ben and like never really tied the two names together. But yeah, like I could see that being the reasoning given. I would also be satisfied with like, this is a code we're going to use if you ever really need help. Yeah. And like, she doesn't spend a whole bunch of time with Obi-Wan in the Death Star, right? Mm-hmm. So like, yeah, I think it's totally possible. And like, people look different, right? When even if he would have said like, P.S. I'm that dude, I'm Ben, I think she might have been like, oh yeah, Ben, hey, what's up? But just like Obi-Wan, he looks significantly different now.
Right.
Yeah. Well,
they spend no time together on the Death Star.
Yeah. She like sees him from afar, right?
Obi-Wan is fighting Vader and they see him from the hangar.
Yeah.
Right.
And Luke is the one who's like, no.
Sure. But I mean, when she's like, Obi-Wan, help me. Yeah. Like, right. Maybe Bail is not like, that guy who saved you just now is Obi-Wan and you should call him. This probably came up later as like, hey, P.S. Obi-Wan is a guy we can trust. And maybe Bail doesn't even realize that she doesn't connect that these two are the same people.
Obi-Wan never even says to Han and Luke, go rescue her. He says just wait. And then while they're waiting, they find out she's still there. And, yeah.
Leia,
go ahead.
Leia is a smart girl in this show, and she will be a smart woman in A New Hope. So I think that she knows. She has to know.
Yeah.
Put all the pieces together. What I am hoping we do not get in Part 6 is some kind of Jedi mind wipe. Wiping her memories of this traumatic experience and forget who Obi-Wan is. I do not want that. Do not Superman 2 this. That's a very old
I think
reference.
I'd agree with that. I think does her having this relationship with him quite fit canon? Nah. Did it bother me for half an episode and then I got over it and ranted about it here for a little while and then got over it? Yeah. I think we can play. I think there's a bunch of different ways to headcanon it. It could be Obi-Wan Ben. It could be that she's speaking in code because she wants to kind of have some plausible deniability. Mm-hmm. Who knows? It's one of those things where I'm like, you know what? Ever since the prequels said that the Clone Wars was 20 years ago, there's been problems with canon. So I'm happy just kind of moving on at this point.
Yeah. And I would rather have those small inconsistencies than a full mind wipe and none of this happened from her perspective.
Yeah. I got really concerned when Obi-Wan handed his like lightsaber and communicator to Haja.
Oh yeah.
I was like, I paused the show and I was just like, holy heck, is Haja gonna like take over Obi-Wan's identity? And like that's why there's this difference and like that's why they have to use this code now and like Ridge Tridge Obi-Wan is actually Haja. And then like I thought about it for 3 more seconds and I was like, that makes absolutely no sense. Let's continue watching this TV show.
Yeah. I appreciate it.
He also does not look like Alec Guinness.
That had not occurred to me and I'm pretty glad. So I'm happy to move on with our lives.
I would have been very upset if that turned out to be true. Good thing it was just something I thought of randomly. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Caleb Newman wrote in next, and raised really interesting points that I wanted to chat about. Hear your thoughts as well, but also I have some responses to first. Caleb writes, I'd like to start out by saying that your Star Wars coverage is by far and away the best that I've come across. I've listened to all of your back catalog, and you and your guest coverage has been exactly what I've been craving. You clearly know and love the material, and that leads you to demand things from it. You want quality and thoughtfulness, and you're willing to call it out when it's not there. I can't say enough about how much I've valued what you bring to the Star Wars universe. Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. I've noticed that you've brought up criticisms of your podcast recently in regards to social justice issues. I fully support you being a social justice bard, but I feel some of your defense of your positions might be slightly missing the mark. At least missing the mark for people who are generally fans of your show and your perspective. I like and generally agree with your points of view of the out-of-universe issues that are plaguing Star Wars. It's a well-known issue that Star Wars fans have a toxicity problem. You may well have new listeners that are put off by your takes. I don't have experience to inform my view, but I have a suspicion that some of the pushback to your woke takes, and I appreciate that he puts woke in quotes because it's kind of a nonsense word at this point, but I understand where he's coming from, aren't as much a disagreement with your takes, but more an issue with the time you're devoting to out-of-universe issues, I think is what he means. You said yourself that so many people want to talk about the new show that you're having to do multiple podcasts on the same episodes. It's a testament to your show, but if you're rehashing the same valid social justice issues, it can get a bit tiresome for your listenership. I'm not threatening to stop listening. I didn't think you were, but I appreciate the context. I agree with your takes, but I love more time spent on the content and a little less time spent on the context. I hope I'm not alone here. I'm just trying to explain more subtly some of the messages you've been receiving. I love your show. Keep it up. Caleb, I think this is a really good point. I think you bring up something that, I'll say to you too. I think this is the first time where we've tried doing two different episodes with different guests on the same show. And I think part of this, Caleb, you're just talking about that, like, I am going to talk about the social justice stuff a lot. And frankly, I really appreciate your perspective. We did get some responses that were a lot more hateful and were pretty clear about not liking it, including some attacks on my own gender and stuff like that and other things like that. But I think you're probably making a valid point that some others might be feeling. My sense of it was I wanted to have you guys' takes. I wanted to have Paul and Ashley's takes. And I think this is our first time trying it. We're figuring it all out. And then we had these major social justice things happen outside of the show that the context is he's talking about, or they're talking about, I shouldn't gender Caleb, in terms of the attacks on Moses Ingram and stuff that we all wanted to talk about. And I probably wanted to talk about a lot with all of you. And it probably meant that I was, at least 1 or 2 episodes, I probably repeated myself a lot on that. And I think that's on me, and I think that's one that the out-of-context issues are, I think, important for us to talk about as fans, especially because our voice in fandom is an important kind of counterpoint to some of the more toxic voices that are out there. But I think it's a very good critique that if it's becoming a bit tiresome, especially because if it feels repetitive, which I think it probably does, because I've now probably done... I think I actually did episodes with you all, with Matt, and with Paul and Ashley, and with Matt Carroll, and in all 3 of those, this issue came up. Yeah, I can see how it would get kind of repetitive and tiresome. And on the one hand, I feel like it's such an important issue that I wanted all of you to have your say. But I think it's a good thing to think about, especially as we go into more shows, is how can we make sure that if we have different voices, we're kind of keeping these takes a little bit different and maybe different focuses and stuff like that. So I think that's my first thought. And so I'm not going to say that I'm going to stop talking about these things because I think they're super important for us to talk about. I think, it might be that we separate it out a little bit more in terms of when we talk about it or not, or just keep thinking about it. But what I get from this email is that, at least as I see it, we're experimenting, we're trying new things. And Caleb is writing in to say, hey, I love that you're experimenting. I think this experiment isn't working in the best way for these reasons, and here's some helpful feedback. So I really appreciate that, Caleb. I think this is one of the best pieces of constructive, critical feedback that we could have gotten. And so I'm really happy about it, and it's going to give me a lot to think about because I imagine for Ahsoka, we're going to have a lot of people want to talk about it too. So that's kind of my take, but I'm curious to you all what you think.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying, Matthew. It's a tough row to hoe because I don't think having 6 guests on is a great format either, because then we're all just kind of talking over each other. But I mean, I do when I listen to you and Paul and Ashley, I talk back to you in my car, and it doesn't really do a lot because nobody can hear me. And so I have things that I want to say, and I think about this content warning thing, right? I'm like, okay, but here's how I respond to that. Mm-hmm. And maybe I just need to rein it in, and not everybody needs to hear my opinion on everything. Tragically, as much as I think they all want it, I know that's not true.
I think I just need to shut up and trust that you've heard me already and let you 2 talk.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I try and do my homework. Sometimes I don't, but I don't know. I do feel like I want to respond to things that you guys are also talking about, but not while all of us are in the same podcast. Yeah, I think it's just a tricky thing that we're trying to work out, and maybe we need to do a little more behind the scenes talking to hash it out so we're not our listeners aren't hearing the same thing over and over and over again. I get that.
Well, first off, yes, Caleb, that was amazingly written feedback, and I appreciate that you wrote in. And I appreciate your point of view on all those things. And for me personally, I, as a Japanese man living in the United States, have a perspective on race and racism, and I always want to center some of my discussion on that because it's important to me personally, and it's important for me to see certain things out of the media I consume. Like, I love Star Wars. I've always loved it, but we talked previously about how the original trilogy was very white, and there was not any Asian representation, I believe. Maybe I think one of the A-wing pilots in the Battle of Endor was Asian, and that's about it. So getting to see more of that, and in this show, I love that this show is centered on a main character who was white, right? Ewan McGregor, and I guess we can say Hayden Christensen is white, even though we don't see him as much in his actual face.
Yeah,
we got to see it in this episode, which was great.
Mm-hmm.
But the background or the secondary characters in this show, Moses Ingram playing Reva. We talked about Tala. Indira Varma is a British actress of, I believe, South Asian descent. We saw Roken, who I looked up and is actually Ice Cube's son, played by Ice Cube's son. And then the pilot, Sully, who is Wade's co-pilot and shouts Wade when he gets shot down. Maya Erskine is Asian actress. So I love that all of these people exist here. And that is ultimately that's what I want to see out of Star Wars. And it's very satisfying to have that all coming together. And I would love for like I said, to be spin-offs with some of these characters. I found them fascinating. I want to know more about them and see more of them.
And you're going to talk about them as kind of makes sense. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think it's a really good way of putting it. And I do treasure both your perspectives because they're not the same as mine. I think, I try to get a bunch of different people on here. Mm-hmm. I mean, one of the funny things is that when I got this podcast started, I was kind of having to twist people's arms and get different people on. And it was always a little bit, part of why we have so many great potential guests right now is because there were always people who were like, oh, I could maybe do this show, but not this one. And then now Star Wars is really taking off and everyone wants to be involved at the same time. And I'm like, can one of you please have a schedule conflict so it's not as hard? I think one of the things that I also think about, I'm thinking a lot about Caleb's comment, and I think there are times when the context and the content can be separated. Not entirely. I don't think they can ever be entirely separated. But I mean, here's a better way to put it. I think in the case of Star Wars, it is harder than normal to separate the two. Because of the attacks that have so clear, the people who are attacking the content, saying Reva's a bad character, and are not. It is possible to not love the character of Reva and not come from racist reasons. I absolutely agree with that. But certainly an awful lot of the attacks on her, on the content of the show, have been because of those context issues around the race of the actress and the character. But for me, it's especially true because in the past, Star Wars has done such a bad job of responding when there were racist attacks or sexist attacks on the content, And I think we've talked before about how in the case of Rise of Skywalker especially, but even Last Jedi, which I love, the racist attacks on the character of Finn and then of Rose, there were some changes that were made that were so having Disney and Star Wars defend Moses so clearly and have her be this character, I guess it's not an excuse, I don't think, but I think it's a response that it's why for me it is important to talk about the context as part of the content discussion without separating the two. I think maybe we could have found a better way to kind of have that. Maybe it's just one big discussion with all of us, but I don't know. But it's a good thing to think about, and something I think as we get around to Ahsoka, we'll keep talking about.
Yeah, and especially with tough context, or I understand not wanting to maybe hear it all the time. I get the news fatigue too, right? And there's a lot of terrible things happening, and I don't necessarily always want to be hearing about the terrible things that are happening because I know about the terrible things that are happening. So I get that having it come up every time is and I get where Caleb's coming from here.
Right.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Definitely.
And when we're talking about Moses and saying you can criticize her performance without it being racist. Mm-hmm. I do think now that we are 5 parts into this show, and the fact that, I said earlier I didn't enjoy the first 2 episodes as much, I look back and I think her performance in those first 2 episodes was more restrained. Whether that's by choice or comfort level with, the character or whatnot, but she let go in this part 5, and it was delightful. Her yelling to the stormtroopers to light them up, and then yelling at Vader and just slashing at him. It was phenomenal, and I loved seeing that.
Oh, and I think that's true. And I think even in episode 4, I think it's a lot of fun to play a villain. I haven't acted since college, but I used to do a lot of high school and college theater, and a lot of fun with it. And playing villains is fun. I don't know if I could possibly look at someone as adorable as the actress playing a 10-year-old Leia and act menacing and evil. I couldn't keep a straight face. I would just want to hug her and be like, "Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't mean to make you feel bad."
When she's sassing you back. It's just so cute. Yeah.
That's great acting too. So yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think it's just important to get into all this. So,
and I want to contextualize the fact that her performance was more restrained could also be part of Reva's character, because at that point she is trying to get closer to Anakin, to Darth Vader, so she can't show her hand yet. And in part 5 she showed her hand, and boy was she angry.
Oh yeah.
Well, especially because, and granted, I get a lot of this from the novels that I've read, both Legends and canon, but one of the things I think is so fascinating about the dark side is that it's this almost a contradiction, in that you're supposed to be feeling your emotions and not letting anything else hold back your emotions. Your emotions, your passions give you strength. Your strength breaks your chains. I'm misquoting and all that. But at the same time, also, you're supposed to always be playing the long game. You're supposed to not letting people see your emotions. You're supposed to, and so it's this duality of feel the anger, feel the hate, and then bury it down deep enough that you can plot till you're ready. So yeah, that restraint makes a lot of sense if you think about it from that perspective.
Gosh, it's so wild. It's the Sith and Jedi ethos are kind of these mirror images, right? Where Jedi are you're supposed to care about people and care about life and defend people, but you can't feel anything for them ever.
Yeah.
And Sith is the exact opposite, right? You're supposed to feel all the things, but hold back because the long game. Yeah, it's just, oh man. Star Wars is so good. Anyway.
And I will say, for anyone who wants to explore this more, read Dark Disciple by Claudia Gray. She's a great author in general, but that book especially, because she talks about how 2 characters, one from a Sith background, one from a Jedi background, start to really feel their emotions, including their emotions towards each other. And it's a great exploration of all these questions.
Yeah, that was the book we were talking about earlier with Quinlan and Ventress, right? Yeah.
All right, 2 other good emails we got. One is from Stephen Brow. Now, Stephen, I want to, let me just read the email and then I'll get to it. So, one is from Stephen Brow. Stephen writes, I see a lot of comparisons to Shakespeare's Macbeth and Darth Vader. First of all, I'm not in a theater, but still I'm not going to refer to it as a Scottish play. If you all feel a need to, please go ahead. Both deal with the fall of a hero. Both Macbeth and Anakin won a battle, Norway and Dooku. Both were passed over for promotion, Prince and Jedi Council. I think he means the Jedi Master. Both were seduced to evil, Lady Macbeth and Palpatine. Disagree on that interpretation a little bit with Lady Macbeth, but we'll keep going. Both kill children and attack their friend, Banquo and Obi-Wan. Both are evil incarnate. Okay, interesting point. Beware something wicked this way comes. May the Force be with you, Stephen. This is one of the best emails we've ever gotten. I love this. We had Austin Titchener, who is the head of the Reduced Shakespeare Company. He's an incredible Shakespeare knowledge. He and I have talked a lot about Shakespeare and the MCU on the Superhero Ethics podcast. I'll be forwarding him this question. Hopefully I'll have an answer from him for next episode. But what do you all think? I don't know how well you know the Bard, and particularly Macbeth.
I played Banquo in my high school production of Macbeth.
Nice.
Yeah, it was a weird... It was set in Nazi Germany. My drama teacher was not, in hindsight, the best dude. But anyway, yeah, I don't remember a ton. I do know we watched the Playboy produced movie, also in high school. And yeah, I also was kind of seduced to evil, Lady Macbeth, Palpatine. like, doesn't Lady Macbeth just kind of go a little, like, she starts having visions, right? And, like, is trying to inspire her husband to greatness.
Yeah.
I guess. Okay. Yeah. Anyway.
I'm not a Shakespeare scholar. I built the sets for production of it in high school, and I studied it quite a lot at that time. I think there's a lot of truth here. The seduced to evil by Lady Macbeth, I think, is not quite accurate. I feel like they kind of like feed into each other. Mm-hmm. And you're right, she does start having, like, there's the out damn spot. She later starts to have she starts to be haunted by guilt and kind of driven to madness to some extent.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure I would say either of them are evil incarnate, but there's definitely, I do think both of them are people who start with some level of, I can make things better if I have power. And then that quest for power allows them to kind of convince themselves that anything is justified.
Yeah, I think that's a good take. Yeah, sorry, I'm stuck on Lady Macbeth and Palpatine because, like, oh yeah, I think, like, Palpatine and Anakin also kind of fed off each other a little bit too. Anakin wasn't as aware of it, to be fair.
I'm just out for this discussion. Thank you for writing in, Stephen. It's been too long for me.
Oh, geez. Yeah, I mean, I think it's cool. I always love a good Shakespeare comparison with modern media. Mm-hmm. Like, the Lion King, Hamlet is, like, my faves. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think you can draw some interesting parallels. I think it's also, like, a testament to just how, like, timeless Shakespeare actually is, right? Where these stories are still good how many years later. Yeah, but this this quest for power and absolute power corrupting absolutely.
Like, in some level, I feel it's almost Othello. Like, to me, Anakin is more Othello in that he is the outsider who everyone kind of judges and no one really trusts to give him, but he is this incredibly powerful figure who everyone needs. And if Palpatine's Iago, you know, in terms of whispering in his ear and making him be worried about the woman he loves. In this case, it's not jealousy, it's fear for her protection. But like, Palpatine kind of like invents a lot of the things that Anakin is afraid of, or he plays upon those fears and magnifies them. So,
and I think like there is like a weird. This is in Clone Wars where Anakin's getting like super jealous of Padme. So I could see like the Padme Desdemona link, I guess, if you wanted to make that. Yeah.
I'm just going to go on a wild tangent and say that Anakin is Hamlet. No evidence to back it up whatsoever.
I mean, he spends a lot of time trying to figure out what he wants to do.
I would say Luke is Hamlet because then you have the like dad reference at least. Mm-hmm. If you're going to go taking stabs in the dark. But yeah, that's really interesting. I'm really curious to see what your friend at the Shakespeare Company.
Austin Titchener.
Austin Titchener.
Yeah. All right, we got one last one from Cindy Fry. Cindy writes, "Oh hey, the dark side users are acting like dark side users! ! I love what you said about Reva. She gets this complicated motivation, but she's still a badass to be feared. Please make sure MCU Matt hears about this. Not so black and white after all. Smiley face. I'll talk about that in a second. Thanks for the great coverage, and thank you for calling out the toxic haters. We need more of these voices to show the babies they don't speak for us. May the force be with you, Cindy." I love that both of those ended with "the force be with you." So and also with you. I'll say in good, well-trained church-going fashion.
And with your spirit.
The MCU Matt, I believe, is a reference to Matthew Carroll, who is from the MCU cast. We refer to him as kind of Panda Isamo, Granddaddy Panda. He's the titular head of the whole Stranded Panda universe that this podcast is a part of. And yeah, he had been, it's more of a teasing thing, but he's very much of, I like Star Trek more than Star Wars because it's more ethically complex, and Star Wars is often too black and white. And he in his defense has been talking that he really likes Kenobi, that he watched Clone Wars and started to get a lot more of the complexity. But yes, I am going to be curious to hear what Matt's thoughts are on Reva. Because we're starting to get more of the like, you can be evil, but not all evil is the same, and not all good is the same, and stuff like that. So, but yeah, so that's the insider baseball reference. What do you all think of the email other than that?
Yeah, no, I agree with like dark side users acting like dark side users and how it's great. And yeah, I think we've talked a bunch about Reva, but I mean, especially in episode 5. Episode 4, I think it was still like gearing up, but ever since she got her little Grand Inquisitor badge, Yeah, just like pure gold afterwards. I love that she went to the Anakin Skywalker Academy of Dramatic Entrances and like had the ship comes down, the stormtroopers part. Like she didn't have a cape, but if she did, it would be billowing under her force powers. Yeah, just so good. And then like all that coupled with like such a really tragic backstory, right? So like you've got sympathy for Reva, but she's still very evil, right? And like I think Paul's description of her as an anti-villain is like very apt. But yeah, I love Reva. She's great. I will be very sad if she dies next episode. But not surprised, I guess. Yeah.
Yes, she kind of has to die now, I think.
I think so too. Yeah.
I think she has to be taken off the board by the time the next set of movies start. But I think we've got 10 years. I think honestly, her being the villain in the next Fallen Order video game is a strong possibility. I think we're gonna get a lot more stuff there. I think.
Yeah. And Fallen Order's in this interim period, like slightly after Obi-Wan, but still before New Hope.
Right.
So that would make sense. Yeah. And like just even like more Inquisitors, right? Like we got Ninth and Second Sister in Fallen Order. So there's still a lot of numbers to go.
Definitely.
But so yeah, like having her come back as an Inquisitor who's kind of just been like knocked down a peg, I think would be interesting. Yeah, I will be sad if she dies, but I will not be surprised if she dies in the next part. Yeah.
I think it's fair. I'm just torn because a part of me is like, Taika Waititi kind of made very clear that he said, he's going to get his trio of movies and he's not going to give us more of the Skywalker saga, and I'm thrilled about that. I want more Rogue Ones. I want I'm excited for the Ahsoka show because it's happening in the kind of the time we haven't really explored. I'm really excited for the Cassian Andor show because that's about a time and that's going to be again about characters mostly below the radar screen, I hope. I'm not really excited for more shows about this period, but Moses Ingram's a great actress and I want to see more of her. So if she's going to be in one of them, all the better.
I think I don't necessarily mind this period. I think it's when we're trying to ham-fist in these characters, I guess. Like, I really liked Fallen Order. I really liked watching somebody else play Fallen Order because it was about this unknown Jedi who we had like never heard anything about before, meeting up with a few other folks we've also never heard of before, going off on adventures in the universe during this time period. And it like filled in a little bit of the details of like a little bit of Order 66 stuff, a little bit of like what the Jedi are up to in this like post-purge period. But yeah, wasn't giving us main characters. And I'm also like, I also been like loving everything Taika Waititi's been touching in the past decade, I guess. So I'm just super stoked for these movies as well. And like, yeah, like Rise of Skywalker was the end of the Skywalker saga. I'm excited to start a new saga as well.
What if we got a Hondo Ohnaka show that is just like kind of a sitcom? Like he like inherits some space station and he's running this space station. So it's kind of like Deep Space Nine, but a little wackier. And has nothing to do, like there's no Empire, there's no Jedi,
it's like
but it's just Hondo running the space station.
Yeah, well, he's Hondo's got like the Ohnaka Trading Company, which is a perfectly legal trading company. That's like post Rise of Skywalker, I think. But I mean, if we had like a What We Do in the Shadows type show of Hondo Ohnaka, I would lose my dang mind.
I would love that. I think another way that another show that I've seen a lot of people propose that they want is a show that's just about Lando, where it's Billy D. Williams as it's kind of like the Wonder Years. Billy D. Williams is the narrator, and then I want to call him Young Gambino. Is it Danny Glover?
Donald Glover.
Donald Glover, thank you.
No, It is Danny Glover. You're right. It's Danny Glover. Donald Glover is a different actor. Oh, sorry.
Okay.
Oh gosh.
Young Gambino Glover is he's the one acting it with Billy Dee Williams narrating it. Yeah. And I think if that happened, like Hondo Ohnaka would be a great side character. But yeah, I also love that idea. Like a show that's mostly just about Hondo Ohnaka, and every now and then we get glimpses of this like very important piece of like the Jedi plot line emerging, but no one cares because we're just trying to make sure Hondo can get the next score. Like that would kind of be wonderful in its own way.
That'd be great.
Yeah, and he is a character where you could have a very different tone. Because most of the Star Wars stuff that we watch and talk about is pretty serious because it's war, right?
Yeah.
But that is a way you could just have like almost a comedy show.
Yeah, and I think like they Resistance season 1 kind of tried to do this sitcom-y situation, and it didn't land.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, season 2 got better, but I think it got canceled before it could actually go anywhere with it, which is sad. But yeah, like Rebels has like a bit of a lighter tone, but yeah, I think like we can have lighter toned Star Wars stories. We got some of them in Visions that were like satisfying.
Yeah, we'll see. But especially because Andor, as far as I can tell, is going to be incredibly dark.
Oh
which
yeah,
I'm really here for. I like the idea of like. I just love stories that talk about how even when you're fighting for the best causes, you have to get your hands dirty sometimes, and that's a hard thing. But yeah, if we're gonna get that, then maybe some Hondo Ohnaka as the balance would be cheese
to even everything out. Yeah, I think that's really important because I worry about like the DCU effect of like, ooh, our dark and gritty Batman movie was really compelling and interesting. What if everything was the darkest and grittiest you've ever imagined? And it's just like, I don't need a dark, gritty take on literally everything. Thank you very much. But having these, like Obi-Wan, I think is a good example of it's very serious. It doesn't have a lot of like comedic points. Whereas like Rebels, I mean, there's like an episode where they're trying to find Malurun and it's like going off the rails, but also has like dealing with war, dealing with the Empire.
I mean, the MCU, I think, is doing this well. The MCU, a lot of it is like, and I love Grimdark. I'll defend Grimdark to the death. But now they're giving us a show about a teenage girl having a crush and having new powers and just being in her community. And it's colorful and it's bright. It's fun. It's wonderful. So
yeah, that's good. Oh,
all the balance. Give us all the different things. All right. Well, thank you both so much. It's been great having you all as well. Thank you to all of our listeners for your feedback. It is a huge part of what makes this show worthwhile. I just love these conversations that we get to share with you all. For either Sarah or Riki, any of the last comments you wanted to make about this?
I know we didn't talk much about episode 4. I'm sorry. That's basically it. Yeah.
Darth Vader, Darth Vader, Darth Vader. Amazing.
Yeah.
Yep. And you know what?
Go ahead. I do have one last comment. Wait, hold on. Maybe not. Did this happen? Did, like, Obi-Wan asks, how long do you need to fix this? And the dude says 3 hours, and he says, you have 1 hour? Why ask? Just tell him you have 1 hour. Okay, that's
I thought that was, like, a Star Trek reference.
Yeah.
It seems very Star Trek, but, like,
why
did you even ask?
I did expect some level of, like, I can't do miracles, Mr. Kenobi. I'll just say, after all of my concern about it, all of my, oh God, I'm not ready for it, I spent about 3 seconds thinking Hayden looked ridiculous in a teenager bad haircut, and then just enjoyed the scene because the scene was great. And I was like, cool. So if, in some ways, it's kind of a fake out to be like, Hayden's going to be the major star, and he gets like 10 minutes of flashback in one episode, but he was great in it, and I thought it was a really great way to learn more about both their characters, and it was fine. And they both looked way too old, and I didn't care.
Okay. I have more things to say. Just kidding. Everybody needs my opinion all the time.
Please.
I agree with the looking way too old, but I like that they only lightly did the de-aging CGI thing. Like, I will take that any day over, like, CGI Tarkin, Uncanny Valley terrors.
Oh, you remember Tony Stark at the beginning of Civil War?
Oh, gosh. Or even, like, Mark Hamill, right? Like, that was creepy. The technology's not there yet. I'm fine using my imagination and pretending that these guys are younger. But I love that scene so much. And I think one of the reasons why episode 5, like, brought this all back for me is one of my big concerns was the, like, when we left, I was the learner, and now I'm the master, not making any sense anymore. But having Obi-Wan tell Anakin that You know, you need to prove yourself too much, and until you can get over that, you're always going to be a Padawan. I'm paraphrasing. Like, seal the deal for me, right? Because, like, Vader is so gosh dang dramatic. He needs to, like, hold Obi-Wan over a lake of fire and have him burn and give him the same speech that Obi-Wan gave him and, like, make all these parallels. But on the Death Star, he's like, I'm the master now. I don't need to be fancy. Slice you in half. Goodbye. Right? Like, and I think it's just, like, this perfect encapsulation of, like, yeah, when we last met, you're right. I was still a learner. I still needed to be dramatic. I'm the master now. Goodbye.
Yeah.
Yeah, so good.
I think that works. I think, like I said, that was one of the things that bothered me. I've just sort of accepted it's going to be wrong, and that's totally fine. But I do think that version of it makes a lot more sense to me. I would totally be with that.
There you go. Hang your headcanon on that.
There you go. It is a beautiful lampshade you've put on there.
Thank you.
Riki, any last stuff from you?
I would like to add another entry to the Anakin Skywalker is so extra. When he knights Reva as the Grand Inquisitor, recall that scene, he tells her to kneel and then calls her Grand Inquisitor. And then the captain of his Star Destroyer who's been standing in the background, walks up next to Reva and places the Grand Inquisitor pin on her without any indication, right? So Vader had to talk to the captain beforehand and say, when I call her Grand Inquisitor, come up and put the pin on her. Come on, man. What is this production?
Yes, it's the Anakin Skywalker production, and I'm here for it. It's great.
I actually thought it happened in a different way, but they would both be just as extra, which is just like, he just tells the person, here, keep a hold of this, and then in the moment just mind controls them, and it's like, all right, go put it on now. You know, like, or
just like, wait for my signal, you'll know when you know. Yeah.
Either way, it was extra. It was wonderful. So I loved it. So, all right, thank you all so much. To our listeners, as you can tell, we thrive on feedback. We love it. We love getting these discussions. You want to critique? You want to tell us what you love? Tell us about the show, about our content itself. What are your theories for episode 6? I'm hoping to get this edited pretty soon, and we will be doing an episode on episode 6 within about 48 hours from now. So, get us in your feedback. Would love to hear your thoughts, and we'll talk about it both when I go live with Paul and Ashley on Wednesday night, but then also when we come back to the final feedback with Riki and Sarah. Over on Superhero Ethics, I'm about to be recording an episode on Ms. Marvel, the first 3 episodes, with Emily Cassell and Zuhair Ali, both of whom I know are huge fans of the show and have had very different perspectives, and are really looking forward to having both of them on. All this stuff you can find, all the ways to contact us, all the other podcasts you'll find on theethicalpanda.com. Facebook, Twitter, email, all the ways to find us. It's all right there. So on behalf of myself, Sarah, Riki, thank you all so much. And as fans, be excellent to each other.
Wade!
Poor Ned. Ned be no.
I need Star Wars to stop having dramatic droid deaths.
Never. You can't watch the light go out from a human's eyes.